So, this is just my asshole opinion, but I have a real problem with minimalism and how trendy it's become. That's not to say that I think that minimalism is a bad thing. That doesn't mean that I think that it doesn't have a place in people's lives, but I think that a lot of people are, just like we always do, jumping onto the bandwagon of a new self help life thrust trend and not really thinking in the long term about how sustainable that is, or even if it is psychologically healthy for us to, again, in the long term, really adopt. So, hi, my name is Ria, and I'm the founder of Hopeforge. And today I'm going to give my asshole opinion on minimalism and the problems that I see with it. Now, first, I do want to say that there are, of course, people for whom minimalism is a great option. We all have different experiences and ways of looking at the world, and there are people where they really thrive when things get down to the bare bones. But for a lot of us, that's not how we function. And I'm not really even talking about consumerism. I'm not saying, rah, rah, we need to have all of the shit in the world and pile it on to show that our lives are valid. No, that is not what I'm saying. What we do when we live our lives is we create experiences and memories. And it's really hard in the long term for us to tether those experiences and memories in our brains permanently. How often have you forgotten something that happened last week, let alone that happened 4 or 5 years ago? I actually yesterday was just thinking of someone who was a friend of mine, a really wonderful online friend. And this is something where I know it happens to other people, and yet I had it happen to me and went, oh, I am the shittiest human being. I hadn't remembered her for 2.5 years. Here's a person where it's been about 12 years since I have interacted with them, but I literally hadn't thought of her for over 24 months. So we as a creature, we can't keep everything in our active memory, even when those things are really meaningful. So a lot of times what we do in order to memorialize our experiences, our relationships, our feelings, just our lives, is we create physical symbols of what we experience, these nexuses. And what we do is we keep these objects around us. And whenever we look at them or interact with them, they don't just represent themselves. We look at them and we say, oh my gosh, this thing means X, Y, and Z to me, right? And they are so much beyond the actual physical manifestation of what they are. And as we live and as we experience life, there are some things of these where we realize this isn't really that fucking important. I don't need this anymore. And yes, we can jettison it, right? But there are many things where we look at it, and even if the thing itself is not something that on its own we would have in our lives, it brings up so many feelings and so many thoughts and memories that we don't see it for just its physical exterior. That is not the whole of the object. Instead, what we do is we see its entire back history and the meaning of it and how it makes us feel in any kind of interactions or relationships we had with this thing. And I'll give you a really good example. So my grandmother on my dad's side, she passed away over a decade ago. And before she passed, we were talking and she said, I'm getting old and I was wondering if there's anything that you really wanted. And I said, actually, Grandma, there really is. There is this cross-stitch picture of a woman reading. And every time I ever went to your grandpa's house, I saw that. And I look at it and I think of you and I think of him. And I love it so much. And if no one else has asked for it, and I'm sure someone else has, but if they haven't, I want it. Because I know every time I look at it, I will think of you. And she looked back at me and she was touched and surprised because she said, I didn't think that anyone would want that. And I was really worried that no one would want to take it because it was a family gift from a family member of mine who lives in Israel. And there are 2 of them in the world. And one of them is in Israel and one of them is here with me. And it's a family legacy. And when she said that to me, the picture not only meant so much because of the ways in which it just triggered these memories and feelings about my grandparents, but also it became this additional symbol of the relationships that we have with our greater family and the ways in which there are links. And I now have that picture and I love it. And it's interesting because it doesn't fit in technically with the rest of my home and my art pieces, but it stands out in a lot of ways because of that. People always comment on it, and I love it so much. And I would never want to get rid of it. And it's something where we have a lot of art here. It's hard to make space, but I will never not have that. And one of the challenges that we have when it comes to minimalism and just living our lives is as we mature and as we age, because that's what we fucking do, we tend to accumulate more and more things. So it becomes very challenging to have a minimalist life if you are the kind of person where you don't just see objects, but you see the symbols that are encompassed in the objects around you. And that is one of the ways in which you really bring meaning and memories into your life. If you look at things and sort of see what those things represent, chances are minimalism, unless you can really boil down the objects in your life, and maybe you have family and friends who are not trying to give you a ton of stuff, in which case that's awesome. It's challenging. It's really challenging to do that because as we grow older, we get more and more memories. We forget more and more memories. We meet more and more people and we lose more and more people. And so, although I think that minimalism is a wonderful trend, and I think that it's really great for people who have a problem with over accumulation, I certainly have that problem in the kitchen. Not really anywhere else, but in the kitchen, if I see a new gadget, I immediately go, oh yes, I want, and then I have to reel myself back. So it can be a really good thing for you when you have that kind of acquisitive consumerist bent. But in other ways, it is, depending on who and how you are, it can be a good, very short time thing. But in terms of a long-term way of life, it's not going to be suited for everyone. And in fact, it could be very unhealthy for people who need those icons of their lives in order to feel like they have connections and meaning, even and especially when the people, the situations, the experiences they had are gone. So I'm clearly someone for whom minimalism is never going to really work, although I definitely do every 6 months a massive upchuck of things that are not meaningful. Anyway, if you liked this asshole opinion, please subscribe for more, as well as for research-based tips, tricks, and information on how to live your life better and improve yourself in the ways you want.